Why do America and China eagerly want to be Vietnam's allies? We could not have predicted that the US-Vietnam or Vietnam-China relationship would be as positive as it is now. If we had traveled back in time 40 to 50 years, it's challenging enough to recover from the war's conclusion and work with the US. Not to add Vietnam's close relationship with China. Managing two large nations while we are still in Vietnam is twice as challenging. And the two major nations are engaged in highly heated conflict. Vietnam will quickly learn the lesson of 1979. If they tilt too far in one direction or the other. But no matter how difficult things become, Vietnam will always exist. Over all other countries in the world, Vietnam is the most concerned with reality. Vietnam is understood by China and America as well, since these two nations bravely and tenaciously assaulted and occupied Vietnam for many years in the past, the power of the whole country. Despite the fact that China and America have much larger military and economic capacity than Vietnam, Vietnam had beaten them and forced their troops to return home. Due to their lack of knowledge about Vietnam, these two nations were defeated by that country. While one rushed into Vietnam to put an end to communism, the other believed that Vietnam was a traitor, and that they needed to humiliate Vietnam in order to combat communism. That's how it happens. Jumping into a conflict without knowing the background of the other country. Vietnam has consistently prioritized its national interests above all other considerations. Vietnam desires independence. The biggest error made by the US and China is to ignore or unintentionally face a country that has a valiant history of repelling foreign invaders and allowing them to become national enemies. The South is not interested in ruling the nation. The North gives up everything. But it is unapologetically determined not to lose the nation and not to become a slave to China. Although he doesn't know anything about Vietnam, Vietnam's next-door neighbor believes he knows the country. The Vietnamese people have a 4,000-year history of resisting foreign powers, which has helped them perfect the military skill of people's warfare and make them unbeatable. Vietnam's specialty is taking the weak and defeating the powerful. Vietnam today realizes that China and America wanted to go, but the triumph of a small landlocked country with a small population remains in the past. Regarding the remainder, you want to strengthen your ties with Vietnam. You have to construct a future with Vietnam as well. Everyone wants to continue having sway in Asia. Everyone is looking to profit from the East Sea. We recognize that. Vietnam has managed to balance it well. In light of these two enormous relationships, see Vietnam as being in a triangle with the US and China, which is connected to several polygons of relationships with other nations like Japan and ASEAN. Vietnam will have greater opportunities to avoid being bargained by powerful nations on their backs because, in the Indian-Russian-European version, Vietnam will be a peak in the polygons like other nations, regardless of how much larger they are than Vietnam. When moving in multidimensional space, Vietnam's importance to Beijing and Washington's goals for Asia go hand in hand. Recently, Chinese President Xi Jinping visited Vietnam on an official visit and met with officials of the Communist Party in Hanoi. He complimented the partnership, relationships between the two nations and promised to advance them. And other economic deals were also reached. Given that the two nations are not only neighbors, but also adhere to similar political ideologies, taking this action would make sense. But there's more to their friendship than meets the eye. When US President Biden visited Vietnam 3 months ago, he was successful in improving US ties with the nation in Southeast Asia, key partner. And Japan followed suit a few weeks ago. Viewed from this angle, Xi Jinping's overtures to Hanoi appeared less forceful, and more like an attempt by larger powers to gain favor in Vietnam, a strategically important nation that will be involved in the war's outcome. Asia-Pacific power struggle. Pacific. Despite Vietnam's communist affiliation, and Beijing do not have a cordial relationship. Although public opinion is naturally not overtly hostile or antagonistic, the domestic establishment is still wary of China, because a large portion of Vietnam's history involves power struggles to maintain independence from Chinese imperial dynasties. Like many other Asian nations, Vietnam has benefited greatly from Chinese cultural, philosophical, and technological advancements. But the foundation of their national identity has always been that they are a separate nation from China, one that is not subject to Chinese political or ideological dominance. Vietnam acknowledges China as its principal economic partner. Nevertheless, this is not relevant here. In 1978, China invaded Vietnam with the intention of severing its alliance with the Soviet Union and establishing its domination over the country. In addition, the two nations contest each other's sovereignty claims over a disputed waterway and maritime lanes in the South China Sea and substantial resources, which, in Vietnam's opinion, results in a non-aligned foreign policy that aims to engage numerous foreign powers, including the U.S., in order to maximize its own strategic interests. Given the two nations' historical relationship, one may wonder how Vietnam can dabble in relations with the U.S. Is Washington someone Hanoi can trust? Despite the severity of its crimes, Vietnam seems to be secure in its relationship with the United States, perpetrated throughout the Vietnam War, as a result of which Vietnam united the nation and emerged victorious in its own manner. Now that Vietnam is seen as a partner, Washington has returned to the bargaining table. Vietnam has political and ideological grounds to doubt the U.S.'s intentions to contain China, and the U.S. will never be an ally. However, what the U.S. does offer is the chance to boost Vietnam's economic growth and fortify its military might to prevent the conflict with China in the East Sea. Naturally, Beijing notices this, and a fight ensues. Compete for Hanoi's allegiance, but in order to do so, China will have to make more and more concessions in order to be able to participate in negotiations and take on other powers. Meanwhile, from China's point of view, Vietnam must also set the terms for participation and the succession to the throne. Vietnam is, in fact, a crucial link in international supply chains and trade, because it offers masks that allow brands made in China to avoid U.S. tariffs and trade restrictions. Vietnam is seeing a large influx of Chinese investment. China's commerce with ASEAN has largely declined as a result, significantly expanded to take the place of commerce with the U.S., with Chinese businesses producing essential parts and components that are sent to their facilities in Vietnam for assembly before the goods are exported to the U.S., creating the appearance of a slow decline in Chinese manufacturing, while allowing China's indirect commerce with the U.S. to continue, so hastening the merger of the economies of China and Vietnam. For the time being, under U.S. military protection, this is sufficient to maintain the peace between the two nations. China isn't in a position to strategically oppose Vietnam. Xi Jinping voted to hurl everything at him because of this. China's top goal is to maintain Vietnam as a neutral and peaceful neighbor, in the interest of foreign capital, particularly in light of America's fundamental foreign policy tenet of fomenting war division between Beijing and its neighbors as a deterrent. But Vietnam just wants the best for everyone, and they are definitely getting it now, considering that the Russian newspaper deemed Vietnam's role in the confrontational relationship between the U.S. and China to be of utmost importance. This is why the major U.S.-China corporations all want to work with Vietnam. They can find them in this manner. However, Vietnam bears a heavy burden as a result of the great difficulty in striking a balance in the U.S.-Vietnam relationship between avoiding offending any powerful parties and seizing chances for mutual benefit and advancement. Since it's not an easy task, Vietnam uses the bamboo diplomacy approach as its primary means of balancing the U.S.-China relationship. Numerous viewpoints have compared this lengthy discussion of bamboo diplomacy to a stereotype of other nations' policies, and some people believe that it is a tilt in one direction or another. But it is an inaccurate evaluation of the core principles of Vietnamese bamboo diplomacy, which has to be examined. Observing the identity of bamboo is that the bamboo tree continues to firmly exhibit the robust vitality of Vietnam's bamboo diplomatic identity, even in the face of high winds and even storms. While the nation is still sleeping, General Secretary Nguyen Phu Trong has commanded that direction, which is a strong base and adaptable body to defend the fatherland from a distance. Vietnam, China, and America all opt to maintain a neutral stance in the midst of the delicate balance of ties, which also makes China Furthermore, the US should commend Vietnam for its conduct in international affairs rather than placing blame on the country. We have undoubtedly seen that the US president was recently greeted by Vietnamese officials. President Joe Biden traveled to Vietnam in order to build a comprehensive strategic alliance. The Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi was welcomed into Vietnam the next day. The visit by Chinese President Xi Jinping to South China on December 1st and 2 is still ongoing, and on December 12th and 13. To create a community of sharing, both parties agree. Vietnam will not be a part of the community that shares China's fate in the future. Since Vietnam have a shared destiny with China, it would be as if Vietnam are choosing to side with China rather than the US. Furthermore, a unique feature of the event honoring President Xi Jinping as General Secretary is a bamboo tree with a canopy that stretches to both sides while sharing a same base. In addition to discussing Vietnam's bamboo diplomacy, this suggests that while the two nations have similar cultural origins and have evolved into autonomous, well-balanced nations, each determines its own course in order to further its own interests and reputation. This also represents the diplomatic qualities of Vietnamese bamboo, which is very resilient but constantly adaptable. The bamboo trees allude to a foreign policy that focuses on forging harmonious ties and broadening alliances with important nations. A bamboo tree is often quite uncommon in the diplomatic reception area, where Chinese leaders are now being hosted. Bamboo trees are used as backgrounds because they are seen as symbols of morality and uprightness in Chinese and Vietnamese cultures. Consequently, the Chinese president just has to sit and gaze at it to comprehend what Vietnam wants. What do you mean? So President Xi Jinping continues to beam and cannot hold Vietnam responsible when Vietnam decides to create a society with a shared future, rather than join one with China? Vietnam has managed to bring the US and China's relationship back into equilibrium by deft and astute diplomacy. Hereafter, US leaders should commend and honor Vietnam's bamboo diplomacy, in particular throughout the discussions. In partnership with General Secretary Nguyen Phu Trong, US President Biden promised to back a powerful, affluent, and autonomous Vietnam. In the past, US leaders have often expressed their support for Vietnam to become a powerful, affluent, and independent nation. However, following this phone call, the White House changed its information, adding only one new word that signifies a slight but significant acknowledgement by the US of Vietnam's balanced foreign policy in the current global context. The commitment was still to support a strong, prosperous, self-reliant, and independent Vietnam. The term, self-reliance, alludes to Vietnam's bamboo diplomacy, which is described by General Secretary Nguyen Phu Trong as soft, smart, but very resilient, fierce, flexible, creative, but very brave and steadfast, courageous in the face of all difficult challenges. We have often used the image of bamboo to discuss Vietnam's foreign policy. The leader of the Communist Party of Vietnam has acknowledged the importance of foreign policy concepts like independence, self-reliance, diversifying multilateral connections, or being a trustworthy ally and an engaged, accountable member of the international community. Talk to the US president in a situation when the US and China are still engaged in intense rivalry, and both have their own political issues. The General Secretary's statement to Mr. Joe Biden makes it apparent that he wishes the US president to uphold the nation's highest moral standards, and to unequivocally declare that Vietnam will not be compelled to choose one great power over another. Vietnam has the following strategies in addition to its extravagant bamboo diplomacy approach to maintain a balance in its relationship with the United States. Prioritizing economic cooperation with China is the first step in resolving differences that have arisen since the two nations' restoration of ties in 1991. During General Secretary Nong Duoc Man's 2008 visit to China, the economic and commercial ties between Vietnam and China saw a notable surge in growth. A thorough strategic cooperative collaboration was agreed upon by all parties. Vietnam and other countries have only recently formed a strategic cooperation alliance. Vietnam is China's fourth largest trading partner in the world, with two-way trade turnover of $175 billion or 1/4 of total trade turnover. According to a comprehensive plan with Russia, China, India, and Korea in 2022. China is Vietnam's top import market, with a significant trade deficit rate. Conversely, when prices are high, the export turnover of commodities from Vietnam to China also shows promise. Over time, governance has become better little by bit. Vietnam is a key strategic partner for China and its biggest economic partner in Southeast Asia. In particular, the recent official visit of Chinese President Xi Jinping to Vietnam resulted in a joint declaration from the two countries pledging to jointly construct a community with a shared destiny. Supporting the Belt and Road Initiative is a bridge that connects China with Southeast Asia. Furthermore, signed a number of significant papers. This marks a significant shift in the history of the two nations' relationship. 25 years after forging bilateral ties, Vietnam has adopted a strategy of ignoring the past and focusing on the future for the U.S. Vietnam and the United States established a partnership based on respect and became into reliable allies in 1995. Vietnam and the United States have a growingly constructive and all-encompassing cooperative relationship that has grown into a partnership. Robust collaboration in the areas of politics, economy, security, and people-to-people interactions. The U.S. backs a powerful, affluent, and autonomous Vietnam, while maintaining global security and engaging in commerce. Mutually beneficial commerce upholds Vietnam's legal system and human rights. The comprehensive partnership formed in 2013 between the United States and Vietnam serves as the basis for the bilateral relationship. This serves as a general foundation for fostering the partnership. The presidents of the two nations released bilateral and joint declarations in 2015, 2016, and May to November 2017. The United States has designated Vietnam as one of the key nations in the Free Indo-Pacific Strategy, Open and Free. In addition, given Vietnam's favorable geopolitical and geo-economic circumstances, the United States is compelled to work with Vietnam on military and security matters in order to safeguard its regional and global interests in the East Sea. In addition, by 2023, Vietnam, South America, and the United States will have formally upgraded their relationship to the highest level, that of a comprehensive strategic partnership. Defense and security cooperation is actively maintained, with a variety of cooperation content, most notably the exchange of high-level contact delegations to cooperate in overcoming the consequences of war and improving maritime capacity. Moving forward, the new alliance has been fortified with strategic importance, enabling both nations to move beyond any uncertainties. Both nations recognize that the importance of the visit extends beyond their own borders and are avoiding the history of the past conflict in favor of common interests generally. The point made by President Biden is that this is only the beginning to establish an open and free Indo-Pacific area for anyone. Additionally, it shows how dedicated the U.S. and Vietnam are to collaboration and advancement in our media industry. Mr. Biden brought with him a significant turning point that served as evidence of the viability of Vietnam's bamboo diplomacy strategy, as well as the direction and efficacy of U.S. policy in the Indo-Pacific. Additionally, developing multilateral diplomatic contacts to diversify Vietnam is one of Vietnam's crucial objectives to maintain a neutral stance in the strategic confrontation between the U.S. and China. As Vietnam aggressively promote ASEAN's unity and collaboration, Vietnam will also be advancing ASEAN's important position in the area. Vietnam should continuously expand cooperative connections with other developed nations in and beyond the region, such as Japan, Korea, Russia, and the EU. The Asia-Pacific region believes that Vietnam will continue to grow and thrive in the future with the appropriate foreign policies. How do you feel about this matter? For us, do leave a remark below the video. Thank you for watching this video till the very end. Please let us know what you thought of it. Make sure you subscribe to the channel as well. Bye. See you in the next video and have a nice day.